Good morning, everybody. The focus of my speech will be the maritime activity patterns that we can see have been illustrated very much in the conference these days, and focus especially on the risk and safety issues that we also see. We have to focus on the gaps in the industry and government preparedness in this region, and we need to look at improvements and innovations when it comes to emergency preparedness. The starting point is, as the State Secretary talked about, taking care of the people in the north, the people at the vessels and the local communities. And at the same time, we have to look at the complexity and unpredictability of the high north. So we have to look at the safety issues continuously. And there has to be a match between the risks taken by the actors and the capacities for survival and support if something goes wrong. And the change in maritime activity patterns call for a renewed focus on the emergency preparedness capabilities needed. The Norwegian government has, as we heard, high ambitions in this respect. And the thing is then, what will be the challenges in the years to come? Well, we see the change in maritime activity in most areas, with the fisheries, as always, being out there at sea, looking for new species following the migration of fish resources. The oil and gas industry moving further out to sea and in areas with lack of infrastructure. The cruise industry, we had an illustration about yesterday where we heard about flow of activity coming from larger cruise ships, 10 new Explorer cruise vessels being built now, and there will be a lot of people coming up to the north. And we have heard also in the previous session about transport routes coming up, both regional distance transport and intercontinental transit. Then the government is in there, and we may have new emergence industries coming up, like the offshore deep-sea mineral mining. We see the pattern in the northern and Russian part of the Barents Sea, where the activity is taking up north. We see it in Russia moving towards the east with the new licenses for Rosneft and ExxonMobil. For the Norwegian government, it is an extra challenge that very many of the vessels in this type of explorations is Norwegian, like these almost 10 ships taking part in the Kara Sea exploration in 2014. So we will have a pattern of activity, different types of activity, different types of vessels, quite a lot of people coming up to the north to explore the opportunities or to look at the sceneries. And we have a lot of stresses to take into considerations for these vessels. We have worst-case scenarios, and we all know what they are. It may be a nice day on the job in the Barents Sea, and suddenly like the Scarabeo 8 brand new unit started to listing in 2012 with 140 persons on board. It may get even worse. Same thing with the cruise industry. It may be a nice day in the Disco Bay at Greenland, and it may end like this on tour to Svalbard, Spitsbergen. The Marpart project is focusing on these risk areas, but in particular, we discuss the management of different emergency operations in the high north, and especially the large ones, where you need to cooperate closely between countries. The central questions is then to be asked, what is the capacities out there to meet the large-scale incidents? Well, most countries has not done their homework with defining the gaps and setting clear goals for the response time. So we don't actually know what capacity we should have out there. But there is clear indication that we're not doing a very good job in investments in capacities in several countries. And we have even the national audits, both in Norway and Denmark, pointing out that we have severe limitations and the ministries has to do something about it. And in most countries, there is less investment money for building up the icebreaking capacities. Do we have the human capital needed? Well, we know that mass evacuation, for example, is a challenging task. We have the Polar Code coming up, but it is a minimum version, and we have no similar demands within the government area. And we lack the technology for emergency operations. We did a test with the present personnel and collective rescue equipment in Svalbard this spring, and nothing of the equipment fulfilled the standards of the Polar Code yet. And finally, the question is, have we managed to reduce the institutional barriers that is causing challenges for the partnerships across borders and across institutions? Well, we still have a lot of challenges. Even we have good relations, as talked about, between Norway and Russia in the Barents Sea, there are still challenges in the communication between the countries and the operational units. We have political turbulence with sanctions that should not interfere with this civilian preparedness area, but we see that it does. Norway is doing quite a lot to fill some of the capacity gaps with new rescue helicopters, new Coast Guard vessels, and so on. But it's probably not enough, taking into consideration the new activity in the north. We do efforts to fill the professional and human gaps with safety and security competence. So we have been building a professional network on safety and security between the Coast Guards and the Arctic Rescue Coordination Centers. And this consortium was established in June 2016. We have also managed to maybe fill the academic competence gap, at least that we have made the platform for this. Through the University of the Arctic, we have established a thematic network on Arctic safety and security that will include 20 universities in 8 countries. The Arctic Council and the EPPR working group is doing a great job on reducing the institutional gaps around. We think they should do an extra effort following up the Arctic Coast Guard Forum with a new forum also for the Arctic SAR institutions, doing a center for analysis and knowledge sharing among the professional SAR institutions in the High North. So my conclusion is that the maritime activity patterns of the High North are changing with the potential increase in risk. The probability of large-scale incidents is low, luckily, but the consequences may be extremely high. There are severe capacities and competence gaps in maritime preparedness in most countries, and there are still severe institutional barriers to face. So the positive efforts is to fill the gaps and reduce the barriers in many countries, but we should establish then an international Arctic SAR forum for SAR mission agencies to overbridge other gaps and institutional barriers. Thank you.